Hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this Tuesday, June 16th. We'll get started in a few minutes as we have the room here fill up. Looks like we have a lot of participants coming in rather quickly. We'll get started in about 1 minute, okay? All right, we're still having some people come in, so we'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll get started. We're super excited to have Colin Smith with us today, and it's going to be a great webinar. Okay, it's 12:02, so let's get started. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Doug Little. I work with the community team here at Wacom, and we have a couple of people helping out today as well. We have Peter Dietrich and Tom Feston kind of working the controls of our Zoom meeting, and we're very excited to have Colin Smith joining us. Colin is a good friend of Wacom. We've known him for many years. He's the founder of the Photoshop Cafe. It's a great site where you can get all kinds of information about Photoshop, how to use it, tutorials, technical information, things like that. Colin has been doing it since 2000, so 20 years of Photoshop Cafe. That's a long time. And Colin has been a great user of Wacom products for many years as well. So we're excited to have him. He's also been the author of 20 books, believe it or not. That's amazing. Good way to go, Colin. He's created books on imaging, technology, Photoshop, photographic equipment, all kinds of things like that. He's also been featured on many magazines, and he's a frequent speaker at a lot of the shows that we all attend: Photo Plus Expo, Imaging USA, WPPI. So that's really great. We're also going to be having this webinar for about an hour, and we're going to reserve the last 10 minutes for Q&A. It might go over that a little bit. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section. Try not to use the chat. I'll be monitoring the Q&A questions and feeding them to Colin as he's speaking. So it just makes it move a little bit smoother. The Zoom session will also be recorded for you. So if you want to watch it later, just watch for the YouTube link that will be on the Wacom channel. We also have some specials going on that are coming to you from B&H. And those will be popping up here in a second, I believe, on the PowerPoint that we're showing here. So be sure to take advantage of some of the specials that we're offering as well. So without any further ado, let's introduce Colin. Colin, take it away.
All right, thanks for that introduction, Doug. And hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here at Wacom, hosting me today for this webinar. So I'm looking forward to sharing this. I know some of the guys on our weekly live stream that we've been doing, our Live from Lockdown, have been asking about some Wacom tutorials. So we're going to be doing that today as well. So I see some regulars in there in the chat too. So Tracy and some others, regulars from our live stream. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us. So why don't we, without any further ado, I'm going to jump in here and we are going to go ahead and I'm just going to move all this stuff out of the way to the other window. Great. All right, so here we are inside of Photoshop. Now, I don't know if you guys realize something, but today they just dropped a new version of Photoshop. So we have some little updates and stuff in there. I'm using the newest version right now. So Why don't we, I think if you look on the other window there, you'll see my tablet right here. Today, I'm going to be using the Intuos Pro Medium tablet. And this is my current tablet that I use the most. I actually started a few years ago with this tablet here. This is the ArtPad 2. Look at the chin on that thing. And yeah, it was fantastic. And I've been using these tablets ever since. I honestly don't know how anybody can paint, draw, or retouch without a pressure-sensitive tablet. And today I'm going to show you why. Because it's kind of like the difference between a ballpoint pen and a pencil. You know, try to shade with a pen, it's very difficult, but you can shade nicely with a pencil. So what it does is it gives you pressure sensitivity. So there's a few things we're going to do. First of all, I'm going to just talk about some of my settings and how I set things up on my tablet. And then we're going to jump in and we're going to do a few images, and I've got some different things I want to show you. And this really is at the core of my style. There's one of my photos that you can see in the backdrop or on the screen right now. And really, I don't think I could even create my style without these. But anyway, let's look at the setup. So as you can see, the Intuos Pro Medium, it has, you know, I can use it as a touchpad here, you know, so I can use that. I can use gestures with 2 or 3 fingers, 4 fingers, 5 fingers. You can program some of the different gestures. We've got the express keys here. There's 8 express keys that I can program to do different things. And then also we've got the touch ring that I can also program to do different things. Now, if you just rest your finger on it, it's actually going to come up and show you some of the settings there. Same, so you can see that's what I've got my key set to. So you don't even have to remember. You know, I remember back in the day, we'd take a piece of tape and write down what we had on there, but we don't have to do that anymore. So I'm going to click on the second one, and that's going to bring up the settings. And of course, that's programmable. You don't have to have that in there, but I find that a useful setting. And this is showing me right now what I've got set up for everything on my tablet. So the pen, we can see in the middle there, you know, the back of it set to an eraser. We've got a double click and a right click on the front. We might change that. And we look on the side here. As I scroll over here, I'm just hovering over it. You can see that's what I've got my express key set to. So that create merge layer, that's the Option Command Shift E. So rather than trying to remember all of that, I can just hit that one button and it does that for me. And then also I've got this set up. And as I tap the button here in the middle, notice it goes between the different things. So most of the time I keep this set to brush size. And because I could use it to scroll, but I can also pinch to zoom in and out on my tablet itself. So if I want to go into any of these settings here, all I need to do is just simply tap on one of these. Why don't we start with the pen? I'm just going to tap, and this is going to take me into preferences. Now, I've heard, you know, pretty much every single time I have someone contact me and say, you know, this tablet's not working the way, it feels kind of weird. It's usually because they haven't installed the driver. So you don't, the pen will work without the driver, but it's not going to work very well. So once you put the Wacom driver in here, you get all the functionality here, and you can adjust a bunch of different things, and it, you know, and it just kind of works in pen mode and all that. One thing I want to show you here is the tip feel. There's a lot of different options, you know, this tilt sensitivity, a lot of things we can do, but I'm just going to show you the main ones. The tip feel is kind of important. So if I click, I press, and you can see I'm kind of pressing on the tablet. That's about maximum comfortable for me. I can go there to go 100%. And that's because I have a lighter touch. Some people are just like, you know, a gorilla, and they're just like, ah, and everything's like that. Some people have a heavier touch. And then also, you know, there could be people with mobility issues where it's difficult to do a soft touch. So you can go in here and you can adjust it. So if I push this up more into firm here, I can push quite hard and it gives me less sensitivity. If I push this further into the soft, a lighter touch now will go to maximum sensitivity. So that's one area you might want to just kind of adjust for yourself. A lot of the time, everything else straight out of the box works pretty well. You can go into custom and you can actually set the velocity here. So this is the different amounts of pressure, so you can make it more sensitive with a lighter touch and less sensitive with a heavy touch. There's a lot of different things you can do. We're not going to go through all of those. But what we are going to look at here is the pen here. We've got the right click is the forward button. So, you know, if you were using a mouse, you would have the right click. So the pen tip itself, when you put that down, would be like a regular click, a left click, and then that would be a right click. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the double click, because that's not really useful. I can just double tap. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to a keystroke. And I'm going to put in the X key. And I'll just call it swap. And so what this is going to do is it's going to swap the foreground and the background color. So that means now if I'm masking, which we're going to be doing a lot today, I'm going to be adding to the mask. And then all I need to do is just tap on the back button here. And that can switch around between erase and paint. So it just saves a lot of time when we're doing that. Let's go back to our preferences again. And of course, the preferences, look very similar on Windows, obviously just at the Windows interface, but it's still the same controls. So the other thing you may want to look at, this is the pen. Notice if you have more than one pen, you can actually set the settings specific for different pens. But also we're going to go down here and we're going to go to, this is the touch. And so I have the touch here on the tablet. And so you can control the speed, acceleration, all that kind of stuff. These are the gestures that come with it, a whole bunch of gestures. And of course, you could do customized gestures if you wanted. Most of the gestures I just use, though, is just a single, and then I use the double for scrolling, and in three fingers, if I use 3 fingers right now, I can drag things around. And I pretty much mainly use those, and of course, you're pinching and just to zoom. Okay, so let's have a look here. We can go into the tablet functions are right here. And once again, we've talked about the express keys. There's 8 express keys here, and there's a lot of different things you can set them to. There's some presets in here, so different type of clicking. So if you're using, something like Maya, where you have to have a third button, you could actually set a middle button, and you could just hold that down there and use Maya with the pen if you wanted. Keyboard, we've got keystrokes, different things. Keystroke is the main one I use, but let's look at some other options quickly here. The tablet here, precision mode. Precision mode is really useful. That's when you're, when you're painting and then you go to hit a menu and you kind of drag away as you're hitting the menu and it doesn't quite take. If you use precision mode, that'll slow down the area it's working in. It makes it very, very easy to navigate with it. And then we've got all kind of these navigation options here. We're not going to go into everything here. We can run applications. We've got on-screen controls. So the on-screen controls are kind of cool. These are the little radial menu, things like that. So you can actually set up more menus in here. A lot of the time, I'll just use it for keyboard shortcut, and let's hit the keystroke. And so for this one here, why don't I do a difficult keystroke, Alt, Option, Shift, Command, E, and I'm going to click on there. And that is merge visible. Actually, it's stamp visible. So the nice thing about that is if I need to use that control, again, I don't have to use all those keys. And also, it distracts me from working because I have to actually look at the keyboard to do all those. Even if you're, skilled at touch typing, it's quite difficult to do a bunch of keys at the same time. It's something we're not used to. So setting these on express keys enables us to just kind of focus on our work and then just quickly just tap here and not really have to look away. So that's a lot of the options here. We've got the touch ring here, so we can set this to do different things, and I'm kind of happy with how this is set up right now. Should work nicely. Display toggle, if you have more than one display, which I do, enables us to use the pen on one display. You can tap that and then you'll be working on your second screen, and you can just tap the express key again and go back. And so that's kind of nice. And then these are the on-screen controls, like the radial menus. There's a whole ton of things we can do in there. All right, so that's basically, there's just the tablet setup. And if anyone's got any questions, specifically about how I like to set up the tablet, now's your chance before I jump in and we do an example there. So I'll just, I think Doug will let me know if you guys have any questions. So why don't we just start with something now. I'm going to open an image. And I think we're going to start with this one here. I've got a few different things to show you. Actually, why don't I start with this? I just going to show you something here. All right. So this is the tablet I'm using right now. That's the specs, all the things about it. But I'm actually just going to use this for the white space so I can show you just a couple of quick settings. So I'm just going to create a new layer. Now, as a lot of you are already aware, when we grab the brush tool, this is where a lot of this functionality is really going to come into play, because the brushes here, the brush settings, this is where we can adjust all the pressure sensitivity. And by the way, you can get there by just clicking on there. So just tap on that and that will open up our brush settings. And so we've got a whole bunch of different dynamics and things like that. And if you look under here, we've got the ability to fade, and that's for people that don't have a tablet. Although with a tablet, you can still use fade to vary thickness. It's good for drawing hair and things like that. But then pen pressure is how hard do you press it is going to control how it works. Pen tilt. So we have a tilt sensitivity on here as well. So we can tilt that and change line thickness, different things. And a stylus wheel. Now, what is a stylus wheel? Well, a stylus wheel is if you have one of these. And if you look on the other menu, the other window there, you can see this is a airbrush. I've had this for a little while. And airbrush is kind of cool. It's an accessory, and it just has a wheel on top, which just gives you a different control. So sometimes when I do use this, I'll use the pen pressure to vary the darkness or the thickness. And then I can use this wheel on top to adjust the opacity. So it gives you double control. All right, so let's just go back here. So the main two that I really use is shape dynamics and transfer. So transfer enables me to adjust opacity, and shape enables me to adjust size. So let me just demonstrate here. We're going to start with the shape dynamics. We're going to set pen pressure to size right now. And if I just reset my foreground background colors, let me just make that brush a little bit smaller. Watch what happens if I press light. And then if I start to press harder, and then I press really hard, see how I can vary the thickness of my stroke. And this can be useful for, you know, for a lot of things. Obviously, if you want to draw and you want to make it look more realistic, like a marker or whatever, you can kind of do that. So it's nice. So you can vary that thickness. Let me just delete that layer, just create a new one. It's probably the quickest way to do that. All right, so let's turn off the shape dynamics now, and we're going to go to transfer. Now, transfer, we can set opacity to pen pressure. So if I make my pen a little bit bigger, then I can start to paint here. And see, I'm just painting lightly. And then as I press harder, we get a darker kind of a paint. So this is like the one I use all the time. And I like to use this because I can just blend things in, you know. So like if I choose a different color here, like I'm going in there, and, you know, I can start to just blend. See how it blends nicely? And it just enables you to do things. You can't do this with the mouse. And this, to me, is the beauty of the tablet, is just being able to do this kind of thing. Now, right now, I'm just putting random strokes on the page. But imagine if you're retouching your photograph, you're dodging and burning and doing different things like that. We have this kind of control, so we can start to shape things. You know, a good example here, let me show you quickly, would be something like a circle. Let me just grab a circle really quick here. And I'm just going to hit the shift key to constrain that. And why don't I just fill this with 50% gray, and I'm just going to show you something here. So if we choose 50% gray, boom, there it is. And it's just flat. It's just a flat circle, like a disc. But now if I create a layer on top, and we're going to be doing this, don't worry, I'll go through all the options here, how to do this when we start to do it to a photo. But I just want to show you quickly. So if I drop my opacity down, let's grab that brush first, B for brush. And I drop my opacity down to about 30%, which is pretty nice where it is right now. I'm just going to make a large brush just so I can quickly do this. And we've got black as our foreground color. If I hit the X key, white will become our foreground color. But imagine our light source is coming here from the upper left. And then the light's just kind of hitting it here. And so this is the lighter area, and you just start to kind of shade it here. And it kind of hits there. And see what I'm doing? I'm just kind of building it up more to the edges. And you also get a little reflection here, but maybe I'll go back and do that later from the surface. And then if I flip this around now and I start to paint with black, as I paint with black in the shadow area, see how we start to get that shadow in there? Let's just really darken that up around there. Let's hit the white area again. And there's always going to be that little reflection coming from the ground. Let me make the brush a little bit smaller and pump our opacity up to 100. And, you know, we could just put like maybe a little hot spot on there kind of thing. And you can see what's happening there. And that's just, now it's making it look more rounded. So if we look at it here, it's just kind of flat. And then as we start to paint, we're starting to put in dimension there by adding those highlights and those shadows. Now, the cool thing about that, and actually I'm in soft light mode. Let me go to overlay. It's probably going to work better. There we go. So, and you know, and of course, you know, I'd put a shadow underneath it. If I was going to do that, let me just do that. Drop that down to about 10% opacity. And then, you know, you would put a shadow down here, you know, from where we are. And you can kind of see we're adding dimension. Now that's really, really basic art. That's like art 101. If anyone's taking any art classes, you know, in school or anywhere, this is the first thing they're going to kind of teach you when it comes to shading. So what we're going to do though, is we're going to take this exact principle that we're doing here, and we're going to apply it to our photographs. And it's just going to really make our photos come alive. Why don't we do that right now? So we're going to start with this photo here. And let me just reset everything. So here's a shot. Let me make this 100% so we can see it nicely. This is just some rocks here, and this is a place, Victoria Beach, and this is Laguna Beach area. And it's kind of overcast, so there's not a lot of shadow or highlight areas. I mean, you can kind of see the shadows and the highlights, kind of very diffuse though. It's a little overcast, and also the sun is setting a little bit. So it's a kind of a, it's not being hit by harsh light. And it looks cool, it looks nice, but I'd like to add a little bit more depth in here. So this is exactly how I would do it. The same principle that we just did with that ball, we're going to apply to this. So the first thing we're going to do is create our layer. So we're going to hold down the Alt or the Option key, and then we're going to click on the new layer icon. So as we tap there to start that up, we're going to have the option. So that's why we hold down Alt or Option, because normally if we just tap here, we're going to just create a new layer instantly. But by holding the Alt or Option, it gives us this menu. So what we want to do is change the mode to overlay. What overlay does is it hides 50% gray, and it allows the shadows and it allows the highlights to come through. Now we have the option to fill this with a neutral color of 50% gray. If you're going to be using any other tools on here, such as the dodge, burn, smudge tool, if you think you're going to use other tools, then turn that on. Otherwise, you don't need that 50% gray layer. However, if you feel like you might blur it or do some things, it does work better with pixels in there. So we're just going to apply that. And notice it doesn't do anything because that 50% gray is hidden because it's an overlay. If we were in normal mode, it would just look like that. So let's go to overlay, hides that 50% gray. And now all we need to do is lighten or darken different areas to add dimension and depth to our photograph. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a shadow. But before I do, I'm going to duplicate this layer. Command J, of course, would also make a copy. And I'm just going to call this one dark and light. Now, if we're dodging and burning, this would be dodge, this would be burn. You know, burn is dark because if you burn toast, it turns dark. But I just call it light and dark. It's a lot easier. I don't have to really think about it. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start to put in our shadows. I think we'll put our shadows in first. So with our black selected as our foreground color, and by the way, the D key will reset and set black to the foreground, white to the background. That D key will always do that. And remember when I set that back button here to the X, watch what happens. See what's happening there? That foreground and background are now switching. So I'm going to use the toggle switch on the back of my pen to do that. Now, you can't just hover it in the air. You need to be within the area of the tablet. The tablet works with electromagnetic resonance, which means that there's a very, very, very weak current. And then you need to be within that current in order for the pen to start to register. So when we're there, and you can kind of see, because as I move it around and get closer, when I'm hovering over it and notice my cursor's moving, that means I'm within that area where the pen is now registering with the tablet. And then I can hit these little buttons. So we'll set black for the foreground. We're going to grab a brush. Now go up under the brushes here. You're going to see a bunch of different brushes, and there's general brushes. You might have your names enabled for the brushes, and that's just an option up here. It has the brush name. There we go. So we're just going to grab a soft round pressure size. I don't really want the pressure size. Let's just grab a soft round opacity. Well, what do they do? Well, let me show you over here. Remember when we were talking about the different brush settings? Let me pull that out. And notice here we've got this soft round pressure opacity. Notice when I turn that on, opacity, that's transfer pen pressure. If I click on the size, it chooses another one, which is obviously turned off here. So we turn that on. Now there's these controls up there as well. So if you go there and that doesn't register, make sure you turn on size and you turn on opacity. You can do that up there as well. So let's just go back to these pens, these brushes. So so I want to use opacity and I don't really want to use it for size. Now here's a little trick here. If you want to keep it set to this, if you lock that chain, that means when you change brushes now, pen pressure is still going to be set for opacity. I'm going to turn it off though, just because I do so many demos. Oh, not there, we're going to turn off the lock because it's very easy to, if any of you have done demos and you forget to reset something, you can cause you trouble later on because you don't know what changed. All right, I'm going to keep it open so you can see that right there. So we've got pen pressure. Now opacity jitter, that will vary the amount of opacity. So I'll put an amount of randomness in there, but I don't want that. So I'm going to turn opacity jitter down. So the jitter means random, and I want this very controlled. Great. Okay, so everything else is set. Now we've got the opacity, the master opacity. So here's the thing. If I set this to 100, I press as hard as I can. That's full strength. Let me undo that. If I set this to 10%, which is tapping the 1 key, and by the way, you can change these. The 5 key will set it to 50, 30 is the 3 key, and if you want to do precise value, 35, type it in quickly. So why don't I start at 30 so you can see there's 30, and that makes quite a difference. So if you want to work quickly, work in 30, and 10 here is very, very subtle. See how it's taking me a few just to start to have it registering. But here's the thing, if I am there and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and that was me pressing as hard as I could, each one of those 10s builds on top of itself, and then eventually it's going to go to 100% opacity. So you can build up that opacity. So I'm just going to rather than undo, I'm just going to do this quickly, and we'll just call this one dark. Okay, so now you know how it works. Why don't we go ahead and now we're going to switch out of technical mode and we're going to switch into art mode. So think about the light is coming from somewhere. I can see there's light coming here. I can see there's light coming there. So what we're looking for is shadows. And I can see I've got a shadow there. And so you're just looking in here. I can see I've got a shadow there and I've got highlights here, highlights there. So that means the light's coming from this direction. It's coming, let me go on the top here and just paint on here, and I can show you exactly where the light's coming from. The light is coming this way. And you can see that because we got these shadows here. Actually make that smaller, I'll make it red so you guys can see a little easier. Here we go. Okay, so we've got shadows there, we've got shadows there. Even in areas like that, you can see the shadow. You can see shadow there. Look for the hot spots. We've got a highlight there. We've got a highlight there. Highlight there. And even when you see this, see the shadow on one side, highlight on the other side. So we know the light is coming from this direction. And that's how you can find which direction the light's coming from, just for looking for those shadows and highlights. If there aren't any in there, then you can just decide where you want your light source. And this is very important. A lot of people mess this up. When you see it flat, don't just start dodging and burning. If you can't determine where the light source is, then say, you know what, I want the light coming this way, and determine that that's where you want the light to go. And then always paint your shadows on the areas that would be shielded from it. So this is, you know, it looks flat on our screen, but if we know this rock is kind of shaped, so we know there's a shadow on this side, we know there's a highlight on this side, it's going to hit those faces if we were going that way, but of course we're going the other way. All right, so let's start painting now that we've got all of that out of the way. And I don't think we're going to do much more theory now. We're just going to go in and start to work. So we're going to start with our shadows. And I'm just going to make this brush just a little bit bigger. And I want to set my opacity down to, I'm going to do 20, let me do 25%. I'll be honest, it's a little higher than I normally do, but I'm going to do this kind of quick for the sake of this webinar so we can get through a few different examples. So just bear in mind when I'm doing this very quickly, whereas in the real world, I might take a little bit longer and try to be a little more precise, but I just want to kind of give you guys the idea. So what I'm doing is I'm actually increasing these shadows. But see what I'm doing? I'm pressing harder or doing more strokes down this area here as it goes deeper into the shadow to create that kind of nook and cranny shadow. And so we're just kind of increasing those shadows there. And this is going to give us more depth. The other thing we can do, see this area here? It's kind of, I'm going to start to chisel it out as I'm going here. See what I'm doing? By deepening those shadows, it starts to add more depth into those shadow areas, and it makes an object look much more three-dimensional. And so when you see those photos, you know, that just seem to pop off the screen, and you're like, man, this thing looks almost three-dimensional, this is how you do it. And once again, you know, I'm going a little faster than I probably would normally, but I just want to give you guys a general idea. And when I say fast, I usually work, I'll work about the speed, but I might be zoomed in usually and doing it at a much more kind of granular level sometimes. But the nice thing too, though, is when I do it out like this and we're doing it kind of bigger and softer, it's going to create more of a painterly effect. If you were to do this, you know, with making selections and being a little bit more precise, working with smaller brushes, it gives a completely different kind of a feel. So if you do want to get a nice kind of painterly effect, you can kind of do that too. And all I'm doing is I'm just adding these shadows in quickly, deepening the shadows. Now you can't do this by just going into curves and adjusting the curves. You know, like you might think, well, if I just go in curves and luminosity masking, I can do this. But you can't, because we've got this human touch here with the brush where I'm constantly making decisions. You know, I'm thinking, do I want this to be just part of one subject? See how we can simplify it like that? Or do I want to go in here and make these areas more, you know, rugged? See, as I'm going in here and painting, now I'm carving and chiseling out these. So I'm actually controlling how much detail is in the photo. So constantly making these decisions as I'm doing this. See how I just changed the way that now that's more of that little strip there. If I was to undo it a few times and go back here, I could make this changing the shape. See what I'm doing? And now it's more like that. So you're literally sculpting. You're sculpting your photograph. Okay, so that's just one of the things. I just love doing this. To be honest, it's just brought back the love of photography all over again, just doing this stuff because it's, I don't know, it's just enjoyable. If you ever did coloring books and stuff like that, it's just like that. But you're getting to alter your photograph. All right, so I'm just going to kind of just wrap that up pretty quick so we can just, I think you guys get the idea of what's going on. So here's a poll here. Is everyone ready for the first poll question? So these polls will be popping up from time to time, so feel free to fill them out, guys. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to see what I'm doing. I'm adding a shape. So you can literally reshape these things. Look at this. All right. So now that we've done the shadow, let's see what this has done. There's before and there's after. So we've kind of added that shadow in here. And in fact, if I show you this normally on its own, this is what we painted. So it's kind of almost looks random, but then when you look at it on the image in overlay mode, you can see how it affects the shadows. And of course you can adjust the opacity. So you can dial in how much of that you want. I'm going to go 100%. And now we're going to switch though. We're going to go to the light. And this is the best part. I really saved the best part to last because what we're doing is we're deepening this with the shadows. And the shadows kind of give us control over the form, you know, where we can simplify or make it more complex. If you zoom in and work with a very kind of a hard edge brush, you can really make these hyper detailed. So what we're going to do though is now with the light gives us our highlights. And so we're going to be painting with light. And I just love what this does, particularly on green, moss, grass, trees, things like that. It's going to make it pop. So let's do it right now. Let's go our brush. We want to make sure we're working with white. And by the way, I could use that back button there if I want to toggle between highlights and shadows, which you would do a lot when you're working closer up. Actually, let me use my touch ring here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start to paint. See what happens here? Now we're painting with light. And this is just hitting these areas. And so what we're doing is we're hitting the opposite surfaces now, and we're letting that light just kind of hit. Now, usually for things like this rock here, I would usually make a selection. I'd grab something like this tool here. Let me show you. The object selection tool, which is amazing. Won't work on that layer, but let me go in here. And I could go there and then just quickly select that object. And what that'll do is it'll give me a mask. So when I'm painting now, I'm not going to go over the edge, and I can kind of do that. And so that object selection in Photoshop is really kind of cool for that kind of stuff. And let's go here. Let's paint this forward surface here. We're going to have some light hitting it. And see how now we're starting to add some depth. I might be getting a little carried away with the light, but that's okay. We can turn the opacity back when we're done. So let's just hit these forward surfaces here. You know, so the light's hitting here. Might be just kissing the top of this rock here. And it might even just kind of expand to there. So let us know which tablets you guys are using. And I'm just going to kind of do that. See what we're doing here. See how it's adding. It's adding a depth. And so essentially, you know, what we're doing here is, this is just really dodging and burning. So you might have heard the term. And let's go right on there. I'm just going to go fine. So sometimes I like to take these edges and just kind of go across these edges with a light area. And then what it does is it just kind of gives a little bit of a rim. And it can just really separate things and make them pop. Sometimes I'll even use a little color on there. You know, like the sunlight color. All right. So let's do a little bit more quickly. One of the things I like to do too is the water. I love to paint white in the water. Look what it does. See that? It just makes the water seem a little bit more transparent. That's the smooth water, by the way. I'm doing it into, you know, the still water. And it just kind of lightens it up and just, I don't know, just adds a depth. Let's have a look at this. If we compare this here before, see that? And after, see how that's really starting to make this pop. So essentially, guys, that's how we're going to be working with these images. Now, if I zoom out a little bit, so you can kind of see it here smaller, let's look at what we've done. There's before, it's flat, and there's after, and see how we're starting to put all this depth in there. Now, once again, you can take this and adjust it. If it's too much, you can take it and just kind of just give it a little touch there. The other thing you could do if you wanted is to actually go in here and, you know, we could add color in there. So if I wanted to add a hue saturation, we could colorize this.
Hey, Colin?
Yeah.
So we got a good question here since you're talking about dodge and burn.
Yes.
The gentleman asks, can Colin expand on how this method is different or better than using curves in his dodge and burn method?
It's just different. I will use curves as well, because essentially what you're doing is instead of painting, well, let me just demonstrate that quickly here. And we will probably actually be doing with curves in one of the other examples coming up. But essentially, if we go here in curves, we're lightening up the photograph here, and I hit Command I to invert it, and I'll go through all these steps in a little bit. So you can paint with the curve now by painting white in there. And, you know, you can see we can get a very kind of similar result. It's just a different way of working. And, you know, I find for things like, you know, if I want to emulate sunlight, which is what I'm going to do in a little bit in one of the, probably the next example, I'll use the curves because I want to work more with color and things like that. And then, so, yeah, I mean, you're going to get a very kind of similar result. The difference is though, when you're painting here, you're just using the brushes and just painting with blacks and whites. You're just painting that way. So yeah, either way, perfectly acceptable ways of working. Yeah. But I usually find when I'm dodging and burning, I like to do it this way. When I'm painting and adding sunlight, I like to use curves, which is actually very timely because that's the very next example I'm going to do. Why don't we do that right now? So let me close this out. Just moving that over there. There we go. All right. So why don't we grab this shot here? This is Atlanta, Georgia. And I went out there for PPA actually and created a course for them on drone photography. And so this is an actual HDR panorama that I made with my drone. And if you zoom in 100%, you can see, you know, it's a pretty big image. And, you know, we can move around and kind of see different things. So this is just kind of a stitched together HDR panorama. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do our dodging and burning. And I'm going to add some sunlight. So I'm going to use curves, and we'll do exactly what the gentleman asked on this example right now to add that sunlight. So one of the things I might do, though, is I might start off with the traditional dodging and burning like I was, to just kind of add the shape and add the dimension. And then we might go in and do it a different way. Because one of the advantages, let me just say that too, when I'm working here, one of the advantages in working with the lights and darks is I can switch backwards and forwards to add the shadow and add the highlight. If I'm doing a curve, I would probably need two curves. I'd need one curve for shadow, another one for highlight. And so for adding shape, I think it's just a little bit more clumsy that way. But then let's do this with the sunlight. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this photograph look like it's got sunlight. So why don't we go in, we're going to go into the adjustment layers here, and we're going to grab our curves. And we're going to brighten it up. So we're just going to click in the middle here, and we want to brighten that up, get a little bit more kind of sunlight going. Now the colors are not exactly what we want. So we could go in here and we could use the different colors and just kind of, we could inverse a blue to kind of get that warmer color, but we're actually desaturating it by doing it that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a double adjustment. So I'm going to do the curves for the lightness, and I'm going to create another adjustment layer. And this one here, we're going to give it a color balance. And the bottom setting here is our warm and cool. So we're starting in the midtones right now. We're going to warm up those midtones. See that? It's looking more sunny now. Let's have a look at the highlights. And let's give the highlights. There we go. Beautiful sunlight. There we go. And then the shadows, we probably could just leave the shadows alone, or yeah, let's just leave the shadows. So what we want to do now is we want to work with these with the masks. So we're going to put both of these together into one layer. So hold the shift key, and we've got both of these. Now we're not going to flatten them. We're going to hit Control or Command G for group. And then what that does is it puts these together into this group. And so if we hide the group and then we show the group, we can see what's going on. Now that might be a little too much in some of these adjustments here. So we can go in here, play around with the opacity a little bit. Let's adjust the color a little bit and maybe pull back that brightness. Great. Before, after. Now what we're going to do is we're going to apply our layer mask to the group, and then we can work on everything inside that group at once. But what I want to do is I want to hide everything. So we're going to hold down the Alt or the Option key, and then we're going to create the layer mask. So click right here on Create New Layer Mask here. And then while we're on that new layer mask there, now that we've created that, everything is hidden. So now that everything is hidden, we want to paint with white to show it. So let's grab our brush, hit our B key for our brush there. And if we paint now, we can start to add it. In fact, let's go much higher. So you can see what we can do now is we can start to paint in that light. So if you look at that, everything's just kind of flat. And then we hit here. It's like, wow, the sun's hitting this area now. Look at that. We've got some sun there, some sun coming across the water. You can determine where you want the sun to come from. And that can be kind of fun to create a path, you know, where you want that sun to go. And so we could just have that sun coming in here, just kind of bringing attention to this area. And then these trees would also be getting it. See what we're doing here. And in the forward faces of the other trees might be getting a little sunlight. And then that sun's just kind of hitting these areas. See what we're doing? We're just literally putting in that sunlight. Now, of course, you could do cloud shadows and dappled light, like, you know, so for example, there might be another little beam of light hitting in this area. And see how it's just kind of adding that dimension. And that light is, of course, coming from that area. So let's go here, and I'm going to drop this down to maybe 10% and just have a little light coming through there as well. So see what we're doing is we're having little patches of light now starting to hit the photo in different areas. I mean, you could go, you know, crazy with this too if you wanted. You could go in and, you know, create something like a new layer. You could grab a brush. And I've actually got these brushes here from Design Cuts. I'm actually doing something for them tomorrow. And these are kind of cool. So they've got flares and different things. And they have these brushes. And let me just make that one a little bit smaller. And if I wanted to have the light just kind of coming from there, I can just kind of tap. Actually, let's make that 100%. 0 key will do that. And boom, you know, we've got the light kind of coming through there. You know, you could add color to it. You could do a lot of different things. And now that we've got our light in there, we could go through now and we can adjust this. We could go back into the curves and adjust it. So if we want to make it brighter, we can. Make it darker, we can. We could go and we could control the color, you know, make it more yellow, less. So we have all that kind of control there, and we're just kind of painting here. So this is a different type of dodging and burning now, where we're dodging and burning using layer masks and adjustment layers versus before when we were just doing it with paint. So, you know, it's a different kind of a look. It's definitely something that I find useful. And then when I'm doing this, I might actually hit the brush here and just go back to our regular brush. And up here is our recent brushes, by the way. And we're just going to tap away. You make that a little smaller. And, you know, because we've got that light kind of there, you might have some reflection on some of these windows. Just kind of picking up some of that reflection. And now I'm kind of digging a little bit into my matte painting skills. I actually went to Gnomon School of Visual Effects for just part-time, took a few courses there over a couple of years. And one of the things that's kind of nice is when you're working with photography is to learn some different disciplines, you know, maybe outside of what you normally do, because it can really kind of expand what you're doing. I probably wouldn't do it at the bottom, actually. Let's just hit that back key. And this is the nice thing about being able to flip backwards and forwards with that toggle switch. Let me toggle that. So now I'm using black because I don't want it that low because the light wouldn't be hitting there. It'd be shaded by there. And then we're just going up, smaller brush here, and just kind of hitting the light in some of these areas. Once again, this is just fun. I don't know if you guys have done much of this kind of work. It's enjoyable. And then you can just kind of see what we're doing there quickly. So if we look at this before.
Hey, Colin, where did you get those brushes? Somebody was asking.
Oh, there's a site called Design Cuts. And they have a whole bunch of different things available, different brushes and overlays and different things like that. So it's pretty cool. In fact, I'm going to be doing something there tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific time. I'll be doing, so you can see that on my wall, my Facebook wall. I've got a link to that. So if you want to check that out, because I think they're going to give discounts and stuff for the brushes and things tomorrow. But anyway, so that's just kind of doing that. And, you know, what, I spent like 5 minutes on this picture. You know, so imagine, you know, you spend an hour or so on here, you could really make this come alive. I'm just kind of doing it rough. And of course, as I mentioned before, normally I'll make selections around here to just get in there. And also I'll work in, let me just show you how I would actually really do this, just so you can kind of get an idea. Because sometimes, you know, when we do these demos, we tend to oversimplify things just so you can see what's going on and make it look like it's less work than it really is. So, so what I might be doing is going in here and using something like the object selection. Always remember to grab that layer, always forget to do that. And that can kind of help a little bit, like sometimes just kind of help masking. Of course, it's not working very well this time. Usually it works quite well. Let's go here. Alt or Option key, I'm just taking away from there. I'm just drawing that line down there just quickly. And I'll just kind of protect that area. So when I'm in here and I'm painting, you know, with the white, I can just kind of paint in there. And sometimes, you know, when you go in close, you might decide, hey, I want to do some things like maybe do a little bit more of the reflections here. So you could do, you know, things like that to try and kind of make it more interesting. And so you will get a lot more detail, you know, when you start to work nice and close here. And then when we start to zoom out, you can see how it starts to just look a little bit better. So when I go over the lines, don't worry, I wouldn't recommend you normally do that. So I hope you understand. I'm just doing that for the demo. All right, cool. Let's do something else though. If anyone's got any questions on that, fire away. And we're gonna do something different here right now. So nothing there. All right, good. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how to do day for night. So this is a daytime scene in Germany. This is actually just a stock photo. The other ones were my photos. This one I just grabbed from Adobe Stock. And I'm going to show you how to turn this into a nighttime scene. All right, so let's do this right now. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get that nice nighttime look. Now, this is one of the times when we're going to use LUTs inside of Photoshop. Now, I'm sure some of you know what LUTs are. Some of you have heard the term, but let's have a look and see what they are. If we go under our adjustment layers, this thing called color lookup. And these are essentially presets, but they're presets, you know, that kind of emulate different types of film or different kind of special effects, LUTs or looks. LUT stands for lookup table. So let's go in here, and what we're going to do is these are all the ones that come with Photoshop. So there's no third-party ones or anything here that you don't have. And one of the ones is Moonlight. It's a really great way to go from day to night, just like that. Very simple. Now, the thing about a LUT, though, is you apply the LUT. The only control you have over it is you can adjust the opacity of it, which would change the intensity. So if you want to do more adjustments, you need to create another adjustment layer, which I'm going to do. I'm going to add a curves adjustment to make it a little bit darker. So let's grab curves. And then with the curve selected, I'm just going to grab into the shadow area, just pull that down a little bit. There we go. Now it feels more like nighttime. Great. So the only thing that's kind of missing is maybe the sky is a little bright. So we could go in here under our background. And I'm just going to do this quickly. Just, you know, I think you guys understand we want to do more than one example, so we're going to move quite fast in here. So we're going to use the quick select tool here, and that will select that. Let me hit the Alt option and just quickly clean it up. Now in the real world, I would zoom in 100% and I would just go over every little area, make sure I've perfectly selected everything. But this is going to be good enough. Great. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's create another adjustment layer on top. And now whenever you have a selection active and you create an adjustment layer, it's going to automatically apply a mask. So let's do this. Let's darken this down. So let's go into curves, grab another curves adjustment. Notice now that we see the curve has created that layer mask automatically on that selection. And now I could just darken the sky. So that kind of gives you that control. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take these two and we're just going to put them into a group like we did before. That's Control G or group. And we're going to call this night. And so essentially the way to do day for night is really simple. We're going to create a layer mask. And all we need to do now is just paint away this night, and that's going to reveal day underneath. Now, this is going to be the day. The difference is though, during a daytime, we've got all this kind of color. Usually when you illuminate at night, we've got these lights are kind of a yellow tungsten kind of a color. So why don't we add one more adjustment on here? So we're going to go, and this time we're going to add a color balance adjustment because I want to make this just a little bit more into the yellows. And let's see how that goes. Actually, you know what? Let's not even use that. I've just got a better idea. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to use a photo filter. So let's use a photo filter, and we're going to use a warming filter. Notice as we do that, it kind of warms up that photo. So if you look at it before and after, so we want this to be our illuminated area. So it's going to be a little bit more yellow. In fact, why don't I push it even further so you can really see? So remember, we've got night as an adjustment layer here, and then it's going to be revealing everything underneath, which is going to be our layer with that adjustment. Cool. So all we're going to do now is click on there. See where it's white? We want to paint with black. And here's a little tip. If you can't remember the masks, white and black, think about it this way. When this is white, the contents of this layer is showing. So we can see the entire contents of that layer because it's white. If we turn it away and we make it black, Command I to invert it, and now we do it black, notice now everything is hidden. So the way to remember is when it's black and it's dark, you can't see anything. When it's light, it's white and you can see everything. So if you want to see the contents of that layer, that's how you do it. Now I'm going to take this photo filter down a little bit because it's just a little too much because it's starting to affect our night color. So let's take it to there, and yeah, that's looking good. All right, so what we're going to do now is just paint with black. So let's grab our brush. Let's go up here. We're going to grab a soft round pressure opacity. And by the way, you can do size and opacity at the same time if you like. You know, some people do that. So if I press light, it's going to enable me to do finer lines. But personally, I don't like to work with them both at the same time. So I just like to set the pen pressure here for opacity. And that's just my preferred way of working. Now, another thing too is I'm sitting here and I'm using opacity rather than flow. Some people use flow and some people use opacity and some people use both. I'm just using opacity right now for my pen pressure. And so let's hit the 2 key and we're going to drop it down. Now, the reason I'm using opacity is because for me, it's more like a pencil. As you move your pencil, you're adding more graphite or more lead to the paper. I guess no one uses lead anymore, charcoal, whatever it is, you know, graphite. You're adding it as you draw on the paper. When you stop, there's nothing more coming out. The difference between opacity and flow is more like an airbrush, or think of a spray can. And then you've got your finger down on, which would be you painting, would be the finger on the airbrush. And so even if you stop, there's still paint coming out. So it's building it up even when you're not moving. And that's what flow does. Flow will build it up even when you're not moving, whereas opacity only when you're painting will it add it. Okay, so that's essentially why I like to do that. Okay, so why don't we zoom in? I'm just gonna double tap right there on the magnifying glass, and that enables me to come in here and see this light. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna begin to paint. I'm gonna go quite high. Let's go up to 50% opacity just so we can apply this quicker. And see what we're doing is we're adding our light there. And all I'm doing is just, I think you can see I'm just slowly just tapping there to build that up. Let me zoom out a little bit and notice I'm just pinching. That's what I can do on the tablet there, just pinch the zoom. With the same hand, I'm holding the pen, so I don't even have to drop the pen. And I can just work with one hand like that. It's a nice way of working. And I know that the light's gonna come out from under there. Now, the other thing that's gonna happen with the light is it's gonna illuminate these objects here that are gonna be facing the light, which is gonna be these flowers. So you can just start to paint that in. And of course, you guys will do a much more precise job of this than what I'm doing. And then same here, we've got this little surface here. Anything that's pointing towards the light is going to receive light. And anything away is going to be bathed in shadow. So I'm just going to do this one with a little bit of detail so you can kind of see how it works. And then I'll do everything else just kind of a little, just quick. So we're up close, we know this area. I might go super fine with this and maybe even bring it up to 100%. And sometimes I'll do this, I'll just go and draw, let me zoom right in. And sometimes I'll do that and I'll just draw very heavy on those edges to give that kind of rim on those areas that are facing the light. So I'm getting super detailed here. You know, if I was to do this whole picture like this, it would take a long time. Now, if you're doing something that is going to be print, you know, a print resolution image, and maybe it is going to be printed, then you can do this kind of detail. If it's something you were going to share on social media or on the web, that is overkill. You know, but see how we're adding shape and form at the same time? And you can see how that light's starting to hit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go a little faster with this, just so we can cover more. But, you know, you want to think about that kind of detail when you're working. And then we know we're going to have light around the bottom here because this street lamp is going to cause light. And then you might, you know, add light on some of these other surfaces, like maybe this surface here. And I would usually select that to do it, but just for time, I'm just going to paint it because that's going to be reflecting that light. And maybe a little bit more on the wall here, just gently. And you've got that kind of light. And we see we've got another lamp there. We would do the same thing, but this time I'm just going to do it quickly, just to kind of show you. So now we're just going to be kind of building out this effect here. And there's other lamps there. You know, you could go down there, just hitting that light there. And so essentially we're starting to light up the street. Now you might have an area here, maybe this doorway, maybe we've got light coming out of there. Let's make it a little bigger and just painting. And right now I'm at 30%. It's a little fast. Normally I'd be working at about 10 to 20%, but I just want to get this done quickly and see we've got light so we can start to paint this. And it comes out and it starts to look pretty real and it's kind of fun. And then, you know, these other lights, let's go up to 100% here. So maybe we want to, you know, light up some of these windows. You know, we just go in there. Once again, I'd go in close and do it. I'm just doing this quickly so you guys can see, you know, essentially just how it works. And maybe there, and then I put a little floodlight coming out. And you can start to do that. You can start to light up different parts of the buildings and stuff like that. You know, we could add lights. We could do all kinds of things here. So what we might want to do though is let's add the light itself. So we're going to go even bigger now. We're going to create a new layer on top. And with this new layer on top, I want to go to 100% opacity. And I'm going to create a brighter light. Now, I've not done this before, but I'm wondering what happens if I use one of these brushes. This might not work, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try adding one of these brushes just to see how it looks. And of course, you guys know you can find brushes all over the place. Brush Easy is another place that has a ton of brushes. And I'm just going to try this. If this doesn't work, then I'll go back to how I normally do it. And I'm just going to click there to add the light. That's kind of cool. So just kind of tapping so we can add those light sources in there. And then maybe what I might do is go back to my regular brush here, just a soft round brush again. And I'm going to make a slightly bigger brush, drop the opacity down about 40%. And I'm just going to tap once. And what I'm doing is I'm just creating that glare. See, that's kind of keep tapping and it's adding that light. So now these lamps are actually lit and they're not just, you know, points of light in space. And then of course you could go through, you could go in and paint some different highlights, you know, there's different things we could do with that too, that you could really just kind of add your little speckles and different things like that. So essentially what we've done here is we've gone from a daytime scene here. We added a little bit more warmth to make it more believable. We turned it into night, we painted it out, and then of course there's curves in the sky, and then we added our little highlights and the lights. And essentially that's how you would turn daytime into nighttime. So anyone got any questions? I think, you know, as far as the demo, I think we've covered some good material there. I'd be happy to answer any questions or anything you guys would like me to show you. More than happy to do that.
Yeah, no questions right now. I've been answering some via text as well. So no questions in the Q&A right now, Colin.
Okay.
Actually, somebody has the question on LUTs. Actually, hang on. It's is the transfer brush for tablet only?
Let's have a look here. Now, these settings are going to be available in Photoshop. These are part of Photoshop settings. So you can transfer on your brush, but if you don't have a pen, these are just going to be these three options: pen pressure, stylus and pen tilt are going to have little exclamation marks by them because they're not available. Because these are pressure sensitive tools. In order to have the pressure sensitive tools working, you have to have the pressure sensitive tablet and pen. So that's what the the Wacom pen here unlocks all these features. So pressure sensitivity has been in Photoshop for a long time, and it's just something that you can only do if you're using a tablet. Because if you have a mouse, no matter how hard I press that mouse, it's not going to change the pressure. It's just working at the same. So if you don't have a tablet, you would just have to work at a very low opacity and just try and build it up. But you would be building it up. You're not going to get a smooth, because you can't do that smooth blending because I'm varying how hard I press as I'm doing this in order to get those smooth blends. So, you could do it without a tablet, but it would be very difficult and you wouldn't quite get as good of results. So you would have to go in here and maybe choose fade, and that's it. Yeah, so all of these, and you'll see that there's a bunch of different things. We've got, just the transfer, color dynamics, we've got pen pressure and all of these. Also, there's other areas too when we're using a selection tool. You might not have noticed, but when I was making that selection, if I go down here, the size is set to pen pressure. So these pressure sensitive tools are all over Photoshop. So if I'm pressing very lightly, watch this, let me select here. I'm creating a very fine selection there because I'm not pushing very hard. If I go here and I press harder, it's going to spread out more where I'm selecting. So I'm actually able to vary the pressure here and, do very fine areas there or larger areas by pressing harder. So, yeah, so those, you have to have a pen in order, a pressure sensitive pen in order for those tools to work.
Okay, and here's another question. Can you go over your favorite brush setting for Photoshop?
My favorite brush setting for Photoshop, it's pretty simple, really. Unless, most of the time, I'll show you, I'm just grabbing the brush here. I'm just going to go here and I'm going to be using just the soft round. In fact, let's just go to a basic soft round brush. There we go. There's a soft round. Now, a lot of the time I'll be doing that soft round. I will go up here if I'm doing masking and cutout, I'll bring my hardness up so I don't quite get a full hard edge, but a much harder edge. But a lot of time when I'm painting and stuff, I'll use just a soft brush here. I'll go under the brush settings. I'll go under under the transfer here. And then under the transfer, I'm just going to set the control to pen pressure. And I'll set my opacity about 15. So let me do that faster, 15. There we go. And so I'm going to work with a pretty light brush. So if I start to paint on here, you can kind of see it's not a lot. So it's very subtle. So I like to do that and then just build it up. And it just gives me smoother, as you can see, I get smoother gradients working with a lower brush, or even, even if I take it lower than that, down to 10 or even 5, let me create a new layer here, and I'll just show you something, hiding these lights. And look, see how I can just build this up and just get a very subtle, smooth blend. And sometimes that's all you want, like maybe there's clouds or something in the sky, we're creating a little more cloud shadow kind of thing. And see, we're just putting just a hint of texture in there, and it's not much. So sometimes, I'll just use a very low, subtle setting when working with photos, because you can hint something very easily without, making it super obvious. And then, there's other brushes I might use for, various effects, things like that. I've got these ones I just grabbed recently. I've been playing around with. They're kind of fun. I can add stars in here. To have a look, different things like that. Let me make sure I'm set to 100. There we go. And that's part of a set that I got. That was the other one I was mentioning to you, Design Cuts. There's a universe builder, so it's got all these kind of tools in there, kind of fun. And then other brushes I might be doing is some of these brushes I like to create my own brushes. And let's see if I've got them in here. Yeah, here we go. So I might go in here and make something like my cloud brushes. And if I want to create a kind of a cloud effect, let me paint with gray. I'm gonna go for light gray here, and let's create a new layer and drop that opacity down on that brush quite low. And then I might just kind of just tap a little bit here, make the brush a little smaller. And this is just a brush I created myself. I'll show you the settings on it in a second here. And, you know, just kind of adding, you know, kind of, I think I'm getting a little too, that's not very good. Let me go here, lower opacity, down to 10% opacity. There we go. And I'm just kind of adding, you know, a little atmosphere, fog, smoke, kind of stuff like that. And in order to do this, to make this brush, let me show you some of the settings. So under the brush settings here, the important thing to make this work is, or any kind of particle effect you want to do, you want to make sure that you've got your scattering turned on. And if you look down the bottom here, this is the scattering. You've got a brush shape, and as you increase the shape, it spreads it out and scatters it more. Let me turn that count down. There we go. So it's less of a count. And you can see that's what it does. So it spreads it out. And you can create that kind of thing. And now I've got the jitter turned up quite high because I want this to be more random. And then the other thing is I'll go under the shape dynamics. You know, you could change the size. So the size varies, see that? There's a variance in sizes. We can vary the angles, which is probably why that brush wasn't working so well, because it's not set up right. And then here we got transparent. And notice I've got the jitter because I want something more random kind of looking. And then when I paint with that, see how it gets that kind of smoky thing because it's more kind of random. And then I would build it up with just kind of different shades. And so these are some of the different things you can do in the brushes. There's a ton of things that, you know, Photoshop's brushes are incredibly powerful. And, you know, I would just recommend, you know, just start playing around, creating some of your own brushes and downloading brushes. And then when you download brushes, have a look in the brush settings here and see how they're set up. And, you know, and then make variations of them, or, you know, derivatives of them. So, yeah, that's a little bit more in brushes there.
Okay, and here's another question that you might be able to answer. What size display are you using, and do you find that there's a better balance to the mapping ratio on a smaller monitor versus a larger display with the Intuos Pro Medium?
I'm using two displays right now. I have a 27-inch BenQ, and then I have a 32-inch 4K Samsung display as my secondary display. And as far as the settings, let me show you this. Let's go into the settings here, because I'm glad you brought that up, the mapping. So I actually have a YouTube video on this, by the way, where I really went into this with more depth, and I used a stencil so I could show you what happens. But let's go under the settings here. I believe I'm going under the, let me see what that is. Here we go, mapping. All right, so essentially what's happening here is there's our mapping, and we've got it set there. So you could change this. Right now you've got the monitor. If you choose force proportions, because what's happening is the aspect ratio of the tablet here, or the shape of the tablet, is different than the monitor. So that means if I'm drawing a circle on my tablet, it's creating an oval on the monitor because it's a different aspect ratio. So if I go in and I click on force proportions, now when I do a circle on the tablet, it's going to be an exact circle on the display. So we can also go in here, we can go into the display monitor, so we can use a portion if we want. So that means I can go into the screen and I say, you know what, right now it's going across both displays. So as I'm moving my pen, I'm going across two monitors. And so you can go in here and you can adjust your work area. So you can target it like, so now my pen, full movement is only going in that area. So, you know, you could go in there, you could target inside that area. And then that would enable you to do things like, you know, just go in there. So that's how you would change that. And also the other option here is we can go into the tablet area. And so we could use a portion of the tablet. So if I decide, you know, I don't want to move my wrist so much, I just want to work in the bottom corner of that tablet there, I could do that. Now I'm in the corner. I think you guys can see on the screen here. So if I'm here, nothing's happening. As I'm moving into the corner, now I'm right there. There. So that is the top corner. That is the bottom corner. Oops, sorry. Went out of there. Let's go back to the preferences. Okay, so now I can just move in this little area and cover all that. So yeah, it's completely customizable however you want to work, you know, by choosing an area of your monitor or an area of your tablet. That answer the question?
Yep, that answered the question, yeah. And let's see, somebody has a question about pen tips. Do you change your nibs often?
So we have in here, this is the base that comes with it. And I'm not very strong today. You can just kind of twist this and the base comes off, but I'm not getting it. So why don't I use an earlier one just to show you, but these are the same kind of nibs that are inside here. This has a nib remover. So if I want to take a nib out, I can just put it, I'll see if you guys can see it there. I can just put it into that little hole there and then just pull it out like that. And then there's different types of nibs that have different feels and stuff like that. To be honest, I usually just work with the nib that comes with it. Quite happy with that. And I can just push that back in. It's quite simple, just like that. And, you know, when it gets rough or it starts to wear out, I'll switch it. But most of the time, no, I just stay with the nib that comes. But you have that option of all kinds of different types of feels with the different nibs. And maybe you find that one of the softer ones might work better for you. For me, I like the default one. I'm used to it, and that's what I use most of the time. But inside here, if I was not so weak, I'd be able to open that. It just kind of pops open, and the nibs are in there. So it's probably a trick to it. Is there a trick to it, Doug?
Oh, the round one?
Oh, there we go. I got it.
Yeah. There is a trick to it. Turning it the right way.
Turning it the right way is the trick. Okay, so there we go. So there's a bunch of nibs there. And what I was doing is I was pressing too hard. So what I was doing is I was pressing down and trying to open it, and you just rotate it and it comes off a lot easier. All right, cool.
Here's another question. Do you prefer the Intuos tablet versus a Cintiq due to the color accuracy on your personal display?
No. Actually, for many years, I used the Cintiq as my main display. And I'm thinking about upgrading my Cintiq soon. Right now, I've got the new Mac Pro, and I just wanted a little bit more resolution because my old one was 1080. But no, I love the Cintiq. It's really nice. For stuff like this, for retouching, I feel like I can use the tablet, you know, just as easily. But then when it comes to things like, you know, digital art or drawing or illustration, painting, the Cintiq is definitely much better for that kind of work. And as far as color accuracy, you can calibrate. So, you know, if you're using something like here, you know, I've got my X-Rite i1 Display Pro here, you can calibrate your Cintiq and get your colors very accurate.
Cool. All right, somebody has a question about, I have an older Intuos, it came with a CD for drivers. Can I download drivers for my new laptop, which does not have a CD slot?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you can just go to Wacom's site, go under support, and download all the drivers right there.
Yep. And another question, why do you use two monitors?
Oh, gosh. For so many reasons. Right now, we're doing this webinar, and I have Photoshop in front of me. On the other side, I've got the chat. I've got a browser window open. I've got another chat. I've got notes. I've got my Sonos controller. You know, so my email, all that stuff. I put everything on the second monitor that I'm not working on, so I can concentrate on the work in front of me. And then when I'm doing work, you know, such as in Premiere Pro and things like that, I've got all my other panels open in the second window. In Photoshop, I don't use a ton of panels. I pretty much figured out ways to get around a lot of them. So most of the time, I just use the layers, channels, brushes, and properties, and the libraries. That's it. What you see here is pretty much the panels I use in Photoshop. So I don't bother opening all the panels on the other screen because you can do with keyboard shortcuts a lot of things that you know, it takes a whole panel to do. So I just like to work minimalistic. But then when it comes to, you know, things like Lightroom, I like to have a grid on one window while I'm working on here. And sometimes I have multiple applications working at the same time. And that's really huge, you know, when it comes to things like, you know, copying and pasting between applications and working between apps. Having one on one screen and one on the other screen is really huge. I find it very difficult to work with a single monitor now because I'm so used to using dual displays, which I've done for years. It's just much more convenient.
Okay, cool. Another question. We have a gentleman that has a 27-inch Mac screen. It's a 5K screen, and he's looking for recommendation on a tablet to buy, and he's thinking about buying the Intuos Pro Small. Do you think that's a good combination with his setup?
Okay, so I'm guessing it's an iMac Pro by the sounds of things with the 5K
Yes,
display. Yeah,
sounds
nice.
like it. Yep.
Nice. I work on one of those at one of my clients. Great machine. And actually, I use an Intuos Pro Medium on that machine at my client's house. And so, yeah, I mean, it's up to you. I mean, the medium and the small have very similar function. The pen's the same. The touch feel is the same. It just depends. You just have, if you want a larger working area or if you're happy with a smaller working area. That's really the big difference that you're going to find with those. And I think if you're doing things like retouching and stuff, the small is going to be okay. It's going to be fine. I also like to do some illustration work. So I like a bigger surface because if I'm trying to create, you know, an arc or something like that, I'd like to have a slightly bigger surface there. So it just depends on how you're working. I have a small that I travel with and absolutely love it. So yeah, just really it depends how much desktop space you've got and what you want to work with.
Okay, and somebody's asking about the new Wacom One. I know you've tried it. I sent you one to review, and
Yeah, actually,
people can check out your review, but
yeah.
spend a couple of seconds talking about it.
Okay, so I have my review set up, you know, on Photoshop Cafe and on our YouTube channel, Photoshop Cafe. I did a full review where I walked through it, and yeah, for the price point, it's surprisingly good. It, you know, I shouldn't say that, but I mean, but you know, knowing, you know, the price of it, it's good. The colors are good. It works good if you're indoors. The feel is just as good as anything else, you know, as far as like the pressure sensitivity and everything works really well. It uses the same pen. It uses the Pro Pen. So it's the same kind of workflow. And I enjoyed working on it. It's great. The only downside of, if I can say is the downside, is if you were going to be working outside and it was bright, the screen might not be quite bright enough in that situation, but I think that's pretty rare that you're going to find yourself in that situation. So yeah, it's really good value for money. You know, obviously the Cintiq Pro is better because it has touch and also that the glass surface is a little bit different. But yeah, the one is really good.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, questions have kind of toned down a little bit, so and I can answer a couple of these via email or text. So yeah, it's almost the hour-and-a-half mark. So if nobody else has any more questions, put them in the Q&A right now if you've got some more questions, and I'll ask Colin. Okay. Somebody's asking if we'll see the poll results, and I don't know that. Maybe Peter or Tom can put it in the chat there. I don't know if we share the poll results with you, but we might. So just monitor the chat there in a second. I'm sure Peter or Tom can put it in there. All right. Well, thanks, Colin. Maybe to finish up, why don't you tell people how to get in touch with you, how they can monitor everything going on at Photoshop Cafe before we hang up here.
All right, sure. Yeah. So as you can see on my backdrop over there, you can follow me on different social medias there at Photoshop Cafe. On YouTube right now, I'm doing 3 videos a week. So every Tuesday, we're doing a video, just a regular tutorial. Every Thursday, we're doing our live streams at 1 p.m. Pacific time. We call it Live from Lockdown. And so we're just doing it temporarily during this time so our community can come together. And then on the weekends, I'm dropping one beginner's tutorial. So we're doing a series right now. We've done layers and layer masks and resolution so far. And photoshopcafe.com is full of hundreds of free tutorials. Been doing that for 20 years. All the tutorials are up to date with the exception of like maybe 2 or 3 of them that I haven't updated, but most of them are up to date. And just follow me, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at Photoshop Cafe.
All right, great. Well, thanks for joining us today. And we sincerely appreciate you talking about Photoshop Cafe and all your experience with Photoshop. And we love your work, and thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody.